Morning, everybody. Fucking God. I swear to God that wasn't scripted. You're a dick, you know that?
I'm
God.
sorry.
No, I'm leaving that in. I'm not cutting it. This whole conversation is going in the video now. Congratulations. As I was saying, I was doing great, and then I got my Christmas gift from Luke here, and just take a look. This man got me a body pillow of myself. I am probably going to set this thing on fire as soon as we're done recording this. It certainly has been a day. That is all I can say. And this day is about to get much worse because today we're going to be taking a look at one of the worst 30 FPS arguments I've ever seen in my life. Now, I will say, we watched this on stream yesterday. You should join us every Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern on this channel. It's a lot of fun. I get made fun of for your entertainment. It's great. And we basically lost our minds watching this because it was bad. The points were either nonsensical or contradictory. And basically, the whole argument of the video is Bloodborne doesn't need a remaster because it's better at 30 FPS. And no, I'm not kidding. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into this and find out why Bloodborne does not need a remaster, apparently.
I know. Just hear me out.
You know, I tried hearing you out once already and went insane, so who knows, maybe I have to listen to it a second time before I fully understand the argument. Spoiler alert, it's not going to be any better. In fact, I almost forgot to say, you better make sure you buckle up your brain cells for this one. Also, I will be skipping the next couple minutes of the video because she's just recapping the history of Bloodborne and, like, you know, who it was developed by, all that stuff. I'm gonna skip to the actual important parts.
So yeah, it's a masterpiece. And yet, without fail, every time I stream the game, there's at least one person who comes in and says,
I don't know about this game. I'll probably just wait till they release it at 60 FPS.
and my heart breaks. Because everyone deserves to experience this.
I agree. I wish I could experience being stabbed in the chest by a hot lady while she holds me close to her. Unfortunately, Sony is allergic to making a PC port for this game and therefore getting free money. But jokes aside, I love how she says that you have a bad opinion if you're gonna wait for the game to run at 60 before you play it. That's not a bad opinion. First of all, it's a preference. Second of all, it's called expecting the bare minimum.
Professionals have standards.
60 should be the standard for every game out there. I don't care what genre it is. And especially for Souls games which require fast reactions and really should not have a lot of input lag, 30 is a big problem. Like, for example, Fallout New Vegas. I don't care how great that game is, and it's an amazing game, by the way. But if I were forced to play it at 30 FPS, I just wouldn't buy the game at all. In fact, later on in the video, I'll show a stream clip where I showed why having a low frame rate is in fact a huge problem. But not yet. You'll have to wait for that. Trust me, it'll be worth it. It's hilarious.
Really though, the desire for Bloodborne running at double its frame rate has turned into something of a phenomenon in the gaming community. I mean, just a couple weeks ago, the one and only Ben Starr said this, completely unprompted, at the Golden Joystick Awards.
Absolutely criminal that we don't have an official version of Bloodborne running at 60 frames per second.
And honestly, right now, in this very moment, we're closer to a Bloodborne remaster than we've ever been. Modders have been emulating it on PC with mild to moderate success. Lance McDonald's 60 FPS mod is a real, tangible thing on jailbroken PlayStations. Not that I'd, know anything about that.
Yeah, and it sucks that these are the lengths people have to go to play the game at 60. Oh no, Sony or FromSoft couldn't possibly just push out a patch that ups the resolution, frame rate cap, all that. Nope, you have to emulate it on PC or jailbreak your PlayStation. I cannot wait to hear her argument for why this is the way things should be, and we shouldn't just get a remaster.
And the game's 10th anniversary is coming up early next year. Which, if you're anything like me, you expect big announcements for franchises you love on any perceivable anniversary. I'm even making this video a lot earlier than I had planned because of this bullshit. Server maintenance on PlayStation's 30th birthday? Please! And even if it's not tomorrow, it makes sense that they would give us an official Bloodborne PC port, remake, remaster, sequel, anything tangentially related to Bloodborne. Any of that could be announced at the Game Awards next week.
I mean, it does make sense for them to do it, it's just they're not, because from what I understand, Sony and FromSoft have pretty bad blood. But yeah, who knows, maybe because it's almost Bloodborne's 10th anniversary, they'll announce the remaster. Maybe it'll be announced at the Game Awards or something. I don't know. Anything, please, for the love of God. She said the longest longer we go from Bloodborne's release, the closer we are to a remaster. Honestly, the longer this remaster takes, the closer I am to just emulating the game. Thankfully, I have Dark Souls 1, 2, and Sekiro to keep me tied over right now, so yeah. But that doesn't mean I don't want the port. Anyway, she's finally now, a couple minutes into the video, actually going to talk about frame rates and why Bloodborne doesn't need the remaster. So here we go. Now we get into the nitty-gritty.
But amidst everyone, myself included, asking whether we could achieve 60 FPS, no one stopped to consider whether we should. I'm not afraid to say it. I think Bloodborne is at its best at its native 30 FPS. It simply doesn't need a 60 frame per second remaster. Here's why.
Bloodborne is best at its native 30 FPS mode. That is one hell of a way to start off the argument, especially since she has played Bloodborne at 60 FPS. You can go to her channel and find the streams where she has played through the whole game with the 60 FPS mod on her jailbroken PS4. I don't know how she could play through the whole game at 60 and then still argue it's best at 30. Like, I hate to pull the, oh, this is objectively better card or whatever, because a lot of things are subjective, but I would argue that 60 is objectively better than 30, but I'll get into why in a little bit.
But first, let's talk frame rate, because what even is 30 FPS?
Okay, she's about to explain it, but I'm gonna say it anyway. 30 FPS means 30 frames are pushed every single second, meaning one frame is pushed every 33.3 milliseconds. 60 FPS has one frame pushed in half the time, every 16.67 milliseconds. But now I'll let her take it away.
Well, when you see a video like this one, it's not technically a moving picture. It's 30 still images all jammed into 1 second. And our brains stitch them together to give the illusion that they're moving. Take a game in 60 FPS and you're jamming 60 frames into that same singular second. What ends up happening is, with more frames to work with per second, our brains can create a smoother image.
But apparently a game running smoother isn't necessary, even though the hardware can absolutely do it. Like, I don't care what you say, smoother is better, unless you do motion blur, because that actually is awful. But motion blur isn't actually smoother, it's just the illusion of smoother. But anyway, I love that she's showing footage behind herself of Elden Ring running at 30 and 60 FPS. And you can clearly see how much better 60 is, so why would you not want that for Bloodborne as well? And that's not even to mention, if the remaster came out, you don't have to buy it. You can still play the PS4 version at 30 FPS if you want to, for whatever ungodly reason. I don't see what's so bad about having options, but whatever, maybe she'll convince me otherwise.
That neuroscience thing where our brains turn this into this, it has a name. It's called the Phi phenomenon. And scientists have tried to study it further, but studying perception is notoriously difficult. Like, how do they know the blue that I see is the same blue that you see? How do we know that both of our human eyes both see at 60 frames per second? Do you remember this meme? It dates all the way back to 1999. So what's the truth? Well, we really don't know. Some research says the human eye sees something around 70 FPS, but other research says closer to 40. And even then, the idea of a biological FPS is really hard to study, and it's really not comparable to an FPS on a computer monitor.
Okay, so then can I just ask why you're even bringing this up? By your own admission, it's not comparable to video games or anything on a screen, because it's universally agreed higher frame rates equal smoother. It doesn't matter what we see real life in if we can see the higher frame rates on screens. I guarantee you before she made this video, she watched that Vsauce video on is your color the same as my color, and then probably the one on the resolution of the eye, and maybe the video one as well. Like Kaden said it on stream yesterday, this is some r/psychology stuff, and by her own admission, it's not relevant, so why are you even talking about it? Perhaps it was to pad out the video, but more than likely, it's just because this is a really poorly thought out argument.
But those sort of ballpark estimates, they do make sense with how we perceive varying kinds of media. Like movies, for instance, are shown at just 24 frames per second. Most of us don't think twice about that. It's just how movies are supposed to look. But then they showed us The Hobbit at 48 frames per second. And we kind of lost our minds. It looked all wrong. Too smooth. And why? Why does it look bad with more frames? Even to us gamers. Some folks think it's because 48 frames crosses over into IRL territory. It's more similar to how our own brains and eyeballs see real life.
Nah, hear me out. It's because almost every movie and TV show ever, at least live action, are shot at 24 FPS. So when you see a movie that's double the frame rate, especially one that was already 24 FPS before, it's very jarring and looks much different. Movies are 24 FPS because that's what looks right. But I have to ask, what does this have to do with Bloodborne? Bloodborne is not a movie, it is a game. When you're watching a movie, you do not have to react in real time to things happening within it. You are just watching it. You are playing a game. Playing a game at a low frame rate is similar to watching a movie at a high frame rate, as in it just feels wrong. Bad, even. Video games and movies are different media, so I really don't get why we're comparing them. Helldivers 2 is one of the most cinematic games I've ever played, but I don't play it at 24 FPS. Things can be cinematic at high frame rates, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Please continue making this horrible argument.
At the very least, it's how real life is shot and shown on TV. Think newscasts, sports, reality TV, other stuff. A lot of that, for the most part these days, is shown at 60 FPS. So when we see Middle-earth in 48 frames per second instead of 24, this cinematic veil is lifted. It looks too real. One critic even called high frame rates a crime against cinema.
Yes, and in the same way for video games, 30 FPS is a crime against gaming. Like, you see what I mean? They're like inversely related almost. Higher frame rates for TV shows and movies looks worse the same way that lower frame rates for games looks worse. And remember, for games, it's not just about looking worse, but feeling worse as well. But whatever, this argument's going on way too long and has nothing to do with anything, so I'm gonna skip to when she actually relates it to Bloodborne.
But what about video games? I'd argue the same is true. And sure, From Software certainly didn't intend to put Bloodborne at 30 FPS just to make it more cinematic and dreamlike. The processors in that base PS4 and the X-Bone were, not great. But if you watch movies like I do, the effect is still there, that cinematic veil. And really, out of all of From Software's titles, Bloodborne would be the one to run at 30 instead of 60. It's weirder, grittier, and quite literally more dreamlike than something more classically fantasy like Dark Souls.
So, is your argument, I'm so confused right now, is the argument that because Bloodborne takes place in a different setting than Dark Souls and Elden Ring, it should run at a different frame rate? Like, what? No, it doesn't matter what the setting of the game is, what genre of game it is, or anything like that. 60 always makes it look better. I guess Bloodborne has to run at 30 FPS because when does the game take place? Like the 1800s? Back then, they didn't have 60 FPS, so it would look bad or something like that. I don't know. Bloodborne and Dark Souls have one very important thing in common. They are both video games. You play them, they require fast reaction times and feel better at a higher frame rate. I am so sick of this argument that 30 FPS makes games more cinematic, because if that's the case, why don't we cap games to 24 FPS? Because then it'll actually be like a movie, because that feels horrible to play. Plus, in games, pre-rendered CGI cutscenes are still capped at 30 FPS or 24 most of the time. It's just that games like Dark Souls, for the most part, have in-engine cutscenes. Except for, I think, like, every Souls game has a cinematic intro that's, like, pre-rendered, so it runs at 24 or 30 FPS. That makes more sense because you are watching that. What, next you're gonna argue that the new Indiana Jones game should be capped at 24 or 30 FPS because that's more cinematic? Like, this is just straight up dumb. But for the love of God, I am begging you, change my mind.
And honestly, when I played Lance's 60 FPS mod after logging hundreds of hours of the game at 30 FPS, it did feel unnerving and kinda wrong. It was kinda like, you know, Uncanny Valley, or like seeing your teacher at the grocery store. It wasn't the Yarnum I knew. Keep Yarnum weird. Let it be this fake cinematic wonderland. I don't want it to be real. Keep Yahar'gul right where it is. Put that thing back where it came from, or so help me.
W Monsters Inc. reference, but that aside, how does something being 60 FPS make it look more real? What are you talking about? What are you gonna say next? That the graphics are too good, so those need to get turned down because it looks too real? Like, huh? Also, just because something is uncanny doesn't mean it is bad necessarily. And this weird feeling you got from playing the game at 60 FPS, I know you probably haven't experienced this because you've been playing at 30 FPS so much, but that's called joy. You've been enlightened to what it's like to actually play a game and have it be smooth. It's a beautiful thing, really. Just like the world of Bloodborne, which wouldn't be any less beautiful or fantasy or whatever at 60 FPS. And again, just because you prefer the game being at 30, that does not mean a remaster can't exist. Again, you can still play the 30 FPS version on your PS4 if you want to. It's not like Miyazaki is gonna kick your door down, hold a gun to your head, and make you give up your copy of Bloodborne for PS4. Plus, you're ignoring that a remaster of the game would also up the graphics and the resolution. So I don't know. So I guess she's probably gonna argue that that's a negative thing somehow. Oh, the resolution's too high. Then that looks too realistic. So we gotta lower the resolution. Like, no. She doesn't actually make that argument, but oh my god, just imagine.
No, but Lance's mod is truly awesome. It's just, the weirdness is my fault.
I have special eyes.
But it's got me thinking about something bigger. Why are we conditioned to think 60 FPS is the best? Is it actually the best? Should every single game be cramming those 60 frames into every single second? I mean, there's a decently large handful of games that run better at 30 FPS than 60.
I don't even know what to say. I'm genuinely at a loss. She just tried to argue that 30 FPS games run better than games at 60 FPS. That is not how that works. That is a contradiction. A higher frame rate means the game is running better. What do you mean it runs better at a lower frame rate? This is like saying I am hungrier the more full my stomach is. Like, that's not how that works. Maybe she's trying to say if you run a game at a higher frame rate, that means you have to lower graphics settings so it looks worse, but that's not running worse. It's running better at the cost of looking worse. But there's no way the PS5 can't do at least the PS4 settings at 60 FPS, if not have it upscaled even more. This is an absolute throwback. Do you guys remember that GIF of like the guy, or maybe it wasn't even a GIF, it was like that image of the dude and he just had his hands on his head, and he looked like his brain was gonna explode. That's what I feel like right now, and I don't like it. Okay, looking at the image again, I just realized that it might be Jackie Chan. Please don't get mad at me, I'm sorry.
Speaking of large handfuls. Oh, sorry.
You will never understand the burden of trying to fit through tight spaces with these pegs.
I mean, Final Fantasy XVI, in which Ben Starr plays the lead, might I add, runs a heck of a lot better at 30 than 60, as evidenced by the recent PC release this year. Also, the beautifully cinematic Red Dead Redemption 2 is locked at 30 frames per second on console, and some gamers even say that the horse feels floaty and weird at 60 frames.
Yeah, it's because they were used to playing it at 30, and then it got an upgrade to 60 on the new consoles, and they weren't used to it. The same way you weren't used to Bloodborne running at 60. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing, that just means it's different and a little weird at first. Don't you think it was weird for me when I switched to PC and I could run Sea of Thieves at over 60 FPS? That was an incredibly weird feeling, but it wasn't bad weird, it was good weird. Also, notice how the Steam forum post she showed, which said that FF16 was designed around 30 FPS, has like a bunch of replies completely disagreeing. FF16 does not run better at 30 FPS than 60. The problem with the 60 FPS mode on PS5 is that the game rarely hit 60, and when it did, it had to drop to like 720p. That is not the game running poorly, even though obviously it wasn't a locked 60, so that was still a problem. The issue was how bad the game looked to hit that 60 FPS, or even attempt to hit it. Also, I made a mistake, I have to correct myself. Red Dead did not get an official 60 FPS patch on the PS5, but like with Bloodborne, you can jailbreak your console and have it run at 60. But still, the point stands. Hell, I played through Red Dead 2 twice, both times at over 60 FPS, and I can confirm the horse did not feel weird or floaty to me. I feel like we need to establish that weird doesn't mean bad. It's like when I got my driver's license, it was weird just being able to drive myself places and not have to like ask my parents to take me somewhere or something like that. But that doesn't mean it was a bad thing. It was just something I realized like, oh, you know, I can just do this myself now. Or hell, I just turned 21. It's like realizing that now I can just buy alcohol. It's weird to think about, but that doesn't make it bad.
And I'm not even gonna get into the weirdness that is Skyrim at a high frame frame rate. For games that can run at both or higher, we're often faced with choosing a frame rate based on stability. And I think most of us would agree that a stable 30 is way better than an unstable 60.
Okay, maybe a hot take, but I completely disagree with this. I'd rather have the chance to get those higher highs than have it be capped. Now, if you're already at a high frame rate, like 90, 100, 120, whatever, and you can like sometimes get into the 130s or 140s, but it's not quite as consistent, then at that point I would understand capping it, because 120 or 100, whatever, is already extremely good. But if I'm going to be playing a game at 30, I would much rather have the chance of it going up every once in a while than just have it locked the whole time. Also, I love how she used Skyrim as an example. Like, just because Skyrim, at least unmodded, breaks at high frame rates doesn't mean a higher frame rate is bad. Like, I'm pretty sure the reason games like Dark Souls and Elden Ring are capped at 60 and they can't go above that is because when you're like dodging and stuff, that's based on frames, you know, like iframes or whatever. I could be completely wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure it's how it works. And so if you go above 60 FPS, then that like actually can mess up the dodge mechanics and stuff. But that doesn't mean anything above 60 is bad. In fact, as I'm going to show in a couple minutes here with that stream clip I was talking about before, too low of a frame rate can actually break a game.
And that's one frame-related criticism that I'm actually on board with regards to Bloodborne. Sometimes it dips below 30, and that's not very chill. But in a game about Lovecraftian horrors and losing our minds as we perceive eldritch truths, what are those dropped frames but the filling of our IRL frenzy bars? Lest. Nah, I'm kidding. In reality, I think the best case scenario if we do get a remaster is to just let the PC version do what PC versions do best. Be ultimately customizable. PC gaming has always been about choice. And if your choice is to play it at 60, maybe my choice is to play it at 30. Everybody wins.
Okay, I completely agree. If a remaster comes out, it should be highly customizable, especially on PC, and even on PS5, you should have the choice to have higher resolution and better graphics at 30, or lower all that but put it at 60 instead. But that statement right there invalidates the whole point of your video. Your video is called Bloodborne Doesn't Need a Remaster, but now you're arguing that a remaster would be fine as long as it allows you to customize it and still get the lower frame rate if you want it, but also have the higher frame rate if you want that. So congratulations, I guess the title was just rage bait or something, but you have officially invalidated the title of your video. I mean, I guess it kind of worked, because looking at your channel, this is your best performing video in a while, but was it worth it? Because now you're going to be known on the internet as that lady who wants Bloodborne to be locked to 30 FPS and not get a remaster. Hey, I mean, if that's what you wanted, then that's what you got, so yippee.
Now, it's not an inherently bad thing for games to look smoother at 60 FPS. A lot of the time, it's a downright wonderful thing. And sometimes it'll make you better at a game, like for first-person shooters and fighting games with their quick camera movements and need for precise inputs. It's also an important consideration for accessibility and motion sickness.
Alright, keep in mind that she just said higher frame rates can make you better at games, or at least allow you to be better at games. That's gonna be very important in a minute here. But also, right now, I'd just like to point out, she's talking about how shooters and fighting games, you need like precise inputs and fast reactions. Hey, guess what type of game needs quick reactions and fast movements and whatnot? Take a second, really think about it. Not gonna play the Jeopardy theme because I'm gonna get claimed, but just think about it. If you said Souls games, then congratulations, you win. What's your prize? I don't know. Go to the store and buy yourself a chalky milk or something. I don't know. Be honest though, if you didn't say Souls games, you don't get anything.
So you get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
But in a Soulsborne title, frame rate isn't what's gonna help you get good. I do admit, dying to frame instability sucks ass, and it shouldn't happen. And they could smooth out a lot of that nitty-gritty stuff with frame pacing and capping. But learning to read patterns, when to dodge, when to punish, none of that is locked behind an extra 30 frames. If you're blaming your Bloodborne deaths on its frame rate, that's a skill issue.
Okay, you are correct that learning boss, like, attack patterns and stuff is not locked behind 30 FPS, or 60 FPS, excuse me. You can still learn that stuff at 30 FPS. That does not mean it is fun or intuitive, though, because guess what? Lower frame rates give more input lag, so you have to dodge the moves earlier than you would normally because the input is not going to register fast enough. Plus, you just said that higher frame rates can make you better at games, and now you're saying that if you die because of 30 FPS, that's a skill issue. Like, are you kidding me right now? I know she said specifically for fighting games and shooters, but guess what? Like I said before, Souls games require fast reaction times as well. And now is the point where I am going to insert that stream clip I was talking about before. I capped Elden Ring's frame rate well below 60 to show how much worse it is. Please take a look. We're here. Oh yeah, this is my Kratos playthrough. Look at him. He's so handsome.
Damn. Yeah, look at him.
Actually, yeah, I got the frost axe and everything. I got the shield, and I got the whip, which is pretty bad, but it's no Blade of Chaos.
It's the closest to the blades, yeah.
Yeah. So you know what, chat? Here we go. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm going to go into RTSS. I'm in the DLC right now. If I can, hold on. There we go. I'm going to lock my frame rate. Let's lock it at 10 FPS just for fun. Because apparently this is my phone.
10 FPS just for fun.
Yep, here we go.
No.
All right.
Oh, sweet Jesus.
Let's sound the bell. By the way, that took 4 button presses for it to actually happen. All right, let's go into this boss fight real quick at 10 FPS. Let's see. Notice how much longer this does not take this long normally. Look how much the game is literally running slower. Yeah. Because of the low frame rate. Like that takes like 5 seconds usually. Frame rate unsuitable for online. Look at that! It literally said the. Oh, I think it's gonna force me into offline.
That is something.
It's even taking longer to load because of the low frame rate.
Well, yeah, it can't show you the progress bar as much.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's unplayable. Do 5 FPS. 2.1 FPS. No, I'm not doing that. All right, hold on. She said dying to low frame rate is a skill issue. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go into here. We're gonna sound the bell. Skill issue. Yes. Thank you, Butterboy. Thank you. The game kicked me out. Yeah, the game literally kicked me out because my frame rate was so low. All right, hold on. Let's go into the boss fight after waiting for 15 minutes for it to go through. Come on. There we go. Jesus Christ. Now, oh my god. Jesus. All right, let's go fight the boss, boys.
Talk about a flash.
Here we go. React to the move. Yay, I did it. Look at that. It's definitely not because I fought this boss several times already. Let's go. All right. Remember, guys, if I die, this is me being bad at the game. Oh, Jesus Christ. Guys, isn't this, like, consistent 10 FPS so much better than an uncapped 60?
Well, yeah.
Isn't this so... Guys, you know what? That was my fault right there.
Yep.
That death was my fault. Okay, obviously, it's a bit extreme capping the game at 10 FPS, but you get the point I'm trying to make. Ignoring the smoothness and, whether it's cinematic or not, putting that aside, if you have a lower frame rate, inputs take longer to register, therefore your reaction time has to be faster to bosses. You are actively at a disadvantage playing at a lower frame rate, but I guess Bloodborne just doesn't need a remaster, you know? Even though 60 should be the standard, even though the PS5 can absolutely handle it, and even though the game desperately needs a PC port. No remaster because my cinematic experience.
Okay, but back to that question. Should every game run at 60 FPS? At least at a minimum. I think a lot of folks would say yes, but I have this fear in the back of my head that all video games are starting to look and feel the same. Like the gaming equivalent to Instagram face, where celebs and influencers are all starting to look the same, in part because their plastic surgery is mimicking the filters on social media. You know, mimicking this fake popular beauty standard. And this fear of gaming Instagram face, it's not unfounded. Bloober released their Silent Hill 2 remake this year, which I adored, by the way, but it just looks like so many games of this era. Third person, over-the-shoulder camera angle, slightly offset with this Resident Evil and/or Last of Us style combat.
I'm going to ask this in the gentlest and nicest way possible. What in God's name does that have to do with frame rates? Is your argument that every game running at 60 FPS makes every game look the same? Because that has got to be the most idiotic thing I've ever heard. You know what, guys? From now on, every movie that comes out has to be at a different frame rate. Let's just keep going down. The next Marvel movie needs to be at 23 FPS, then 22, and so on. We're gonna keep going backwards until we hit 0 FPS. We will quite literally be watching Marvel movies in, what, 2050 at 0 FPS, because otherwise they look too similar. Look, I will not deny, I completely agree that a lot of games feel similar in terms of the third person, blah, 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 over the shoulder, all that stuff that she just said. But what does this have to do with frame rate? Did she, like, accidentally edit this into this video when it was supposed to go in a different video instead, about how a lot of games feel the same now? Like, I am so confused right now. There's still 3 minutes left in this video, so maybe it'll turn around, but spoiler alert, it's not going to.
Anyway, if we push for a Bloodborne 60 FPS remaster just because that's what games should look like, and that's what's popular and makes the studios money, we tread a dark path, I fear.
How is 60 FPS treading a dark path? Actually, how? It's not remaking the game, it's not changing anything fundamental about it, it's just making it run better. What is the problem with a game running better? This isn't like a game remake where they change everything that made the original special and therefore the new version sucks. We are just asking for the same exact game at a higher frame rate. Something is not clicking in her head, and I don't know why. This is really not that complicated, or at least it shouldn't be.
And even right now as I'm talking to you, I don't really know what I want. I'm like Papa G, unsure if I'm going in to kiss my wife or going full wolf mode and eating her.
Oh, trust me, you've made it very clear you have no idea what you want. Your video is called Bloodborne Doesn't Need a Remaster, but at the same time, you're okay with a remaster as long as it allows for customization, whatever, I don't care. Which it would on PC, so like, what is the problem? I understand not fully knowing what you want from certain things, but this is just stupid.
Cause like, if they release a Bloodborne PC port, remaster, remake, sequel, whatever, will I be over the moon? Absolutely. But do I also worry someone might take a crack at this and absolutely bungle it? Mangle my beautiful boy? Yeah. Of course, the Demon's Souls remake comes to mind here. Again, a totally kick-ass remake, but a lot of that original artistic intent was kind of lost in the shuffle when Bluepoint remade it. If you want to learn more about that whole can of worms, I highly recommend this series by Illusory Wall.
Okay, but we're not talking about a remake of Bloodborne. We're just talking about the same game ported to PS5 and PC, which allows for 60 FPS to be possible. Why is this so hard to understand? Nobody's asking for a Demon's Souls level remake or anything. Like, oh my god. This is like actually really starting to annoy me. Thank God it's almost over. And plus, that's not to mention 60 FPS on Demon's Souls is not what made the game worse or whatever. I don't know anything about it. But she's saying like artistic direction was lost or the original intent was lost. That is not because of the 60 FPS. That is because they remade the game from the ground up. Does she think a remaster and a remake is the same thing? Because that's what I'm starting to think.
So yeah, even if you are frothing at the mouth for 60 FPS Bloodborne, jonesing for that Bluepoint style remake, it should absolutely not stop you from playing the brilliant masterpiece that exists right now.
I mean, like I said before when I mentioned New Vegas, I don't care how good a game is, if I am forced to play it at 30 FPS, that is automatically a turnoff. Especially if it's not available on my platform. Like, that's the other problem, is that the game just straight up isn't on PC, which is the big reason people want the remaster. Because not only would it allow 60 FPS on PS5, but also it would cause a PC port to happen, or at least ideally. Who knows, maybe they do something like The Last of Us Part 2, where they just remaster it but don't put it on PC. Which, you know, that's fine by me. That game could stay far away from PC for all I care.
At 30 FPS. I think the best case scenario here, which I kind of alluded to earlier, is for the devs to tackle this the same way that the folks at Abbey Road Studios did when they remastered the Beatles albums. They used modern technology to turn those originally only mono records into these dynamic stereo albums. But they also re-released those original mono recordings in a nice shiny box set.
So now we're comparing Bloodborne to the Beatles. How did we get here? This is not comparable at all. Okay, so the Beatles albums got re-released with stereo this time. So then Bloodborne being re-released at 60 FPS would be fine, but then they wouldn't need to re-release the original version because you could still buy the original version. It's a digital game. It's not like you're physically, oh my god. And yes, I understand there's physical copies, but you know what I mean? You can still buy the original PS4 version on the PlayStation Store. Yeah, I'm done. I'm actually gonna lose it in a second. Somehow we went from comparing Bloodborne to movies to then the Beatles. It's like that Minecraft achievement. How did we get here? You know what? Don't even answer that. I don't want to know. Just, I'm ending the video. I can't handle this. Thank you all so much for watching, especially if you made it to the end of this. This is the second half-hour video I've released in a row. Dear God, ignore the 2-week time span between them. So yeah, huge props if you made it to the end. Like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't like it, subscribe if you want to see more. Join us every Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern for Salt Streams, which is where I got the clip from before. So if you thought that was funny, then be sure to join us. And also join us every Tuesday for gaming streams, and I will catch you all next time.